Welcome to another Bonsai Wire podcast. I'm Eric Schrader, and I'm here with
Mike Pistello.
And I think today we're going to talk a little bit about Mike's history with bonsai, which is almost as long as he is old. Mike is going to be both a demonstrator as well as an exhibitor at this year's Pacific Bonsai Expo in October. Mike, how did you get started?
So got started many years ago. My grandfather, he actually, I'll go back to his early beginnings. So right around the early 70s, he started attending bonsai shows in the Bay Area, and the first show he attended was Fuji Bonsai Club, which is a club I later became a member of before it went out of existence. But so he got started early 70s, and then I remember as a kid seeing or going to his house and seeing his trees and thinking they were cool, not necessarily knowing much about it. And then right around 7th, 8th grade, I was out there with him, and he was like, "Hey, you want to try this?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So he gave me a tree, something I think that probably was relatively inexpensive at the time, and just said, have fun, enjoy it. And it just sort of took off from there. And here I am. So let's look 30 years later.
Nice. So you were 7, so you were like 12 years old or so?
Yeah, 12 or 13, something around there. But,
so like 30 years.
30 years. Yeah, I'll be 45 in November. So before we started recording, you were talking about your Blue Atlas cedar that you have, and that actually came from your grandfather? Yeah. So when he did something that a lot of people in bonsai do, which I hope to break the cycle of, is that he hung onto his trees for too long. Mm-hmm. And he got older, and a lot of the trees started to die off because he couldn't care for them properly as he aged. And this is one of the trees that I was able to get from him when he passed away. And I remember it was one of his favorite trees because I know he tells stories about it all the time. And it was basically a tree that he got from a nursery in El Cerrito where he lived. And for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it, but it was, I remember he liked going there because it was an old Italian guy that owned it. And so he was like, "Hey, I'm supporting my people, So
right, yeah.
He went, and I know that the tree basically started as a 1 gallon and probably no more than maybe a 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch in thickness. And I know we can't see it while we're talking, but it's probably maybe about 4 inches thick now. And it's been container grown the entire time. And I know he got it right around the mid 70s, so I estimate it to be about 50 years old, and it had literally been grown in a bonsai pot the entire time.
Yeah, I mean, so we're both looking at it, and I think you have a pretty active Instagram account at MVP Bonsai, I believe.
Correct, yeah.
When I asked you about those initials, you said your parents did you a solid.
They did. That's actually a real thing. They did.
So if people want to see pictures of Mike's trees, they can, while you're listening to the podcast or afterwards, you can go check out his Instagram account. And I think that you've done a great job with that little Blue Atlas cedar there. I think it's there. I was telling you that seems like every beginner wants one right now, and they're
right.
really hard to find. And
yeah.
I don't think the nurseries actually sell 1 gallon so much anymore. They sell them as bigger, older trees, so you can't really bend the trunk when you get them unless you get them from a bonsai nursery.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot. Once in a while, they'll pop up in a show auction or a show sale, and
right.
They're usually half dead because they haven't been cared for properly or they've been neglected. So, yeah, to get one, and I'll give my buddy Howard a lot of credit. I actually, when I had a ton of trees and I didn't have a lot of space, this was one that I let him take care of for about, I think he had it right around 7 or 8 years, and then about 2.5, 3 years ago, I got it back from him. I was like, "Hey, I think it's time for it to come back now that I've reduced my collection down." So, and then I restyled it, put it in the pot that it's in, which is just a growing pot. And I bought a really nice exhibit pot from Peter T last year, and I plan probably 2026 to repot it into that, and I'll maybe give it a shot for the expo in a couple years. Maybe
in a medium display, because it's about 12 inches across?
Yeah, I'd say about 11, 12 inches, somewhere in there.
Yeah. So you said that you went to a Fuji Club meeting, and you said that was in Berkeley?
Yes.
But that wasn't where you actually got started in terms of clubs for yourself. When you were a teenager, did you start with Yamato?
No, so I actually started with Fuji.
Oh, okay.
So Fuji Bonsai Club was the first club that I don't remember exactly how I got connected with Dennis Makashima, but I know that he actually, I think it was through an old member named Dan Turley, who was a family friend who, he took me to my first meeting, and then, because I wasn't driving yet, I had no ride to get to so I know that Dennis, quite a few times would pick me up from my house, and I lived about 10, 15 minutes from him at the time, and he'd pick me up and would drive me to the meetings so I could go, which was really awesome that he did that. And it was a little bit tough for me at first, because it was me, this young white kid that didn't speak any Japanese, and it was all, I would say probably the youngest person to me was maybe mid-50s at the time. So, you're talking a 40-year difference. And
were the meetings conducted in Japanese?
No, I wouldn't say that. There was definitely a lot of Japanese being spoken. The birds flying by. A lot of Japanese being spoken amongst the different members, but once they like kind of started the meeting, and whatever demo they did, there was usually in English. Sometimes the questions came across in Japanese, and I had to figure those things out. But I think it sort of helped me to understand the concepts, and because even though I didn't understand what they were saying, sometimes I could visualize and see, and I'm definitely a visual learner, so seeing it happen in front of me was a big help for me.
And so you said that Fuji folded at some point, and that it was Jimmy Imadomi's club.
Correct.
And then it folded. What was I don't know anything about this, having come up kind of in the bonsai scene in the Bay Area. I actually don't know anything about either Fuji or Yamato. So do you have like kind of a timeline?
Yeah. So I want to say,
we're getting like the geese are just
as soon as the geese are done making
they're
noise,
circling.
Yeah, I don't recall exactly, but I want to say maybe early 2000s would be around the time, and I know that Fuji had a lot of old members, and so I think that just the interest, people started to pass away, and there weren't enough young members to keep it going, and so that's pretty much my understanding as to why it sort of went under. But yeah, as far as Yamato, I got into Yamato, let's see, I was 16 years old, and I remember that because I got my driver's license, and first thing I did was drive out to Dwight Way Nursery to see Johnny, and I met him, and sort of instantly became friends. And he was just very, very accepting of me, very welcoming. It wasn't long, I would say 4 or 5 years later, to where he was inviting me to come help him work on his trees, and I don't know, maybe he saw something in me that was a talent, I guess, and so he let me do a lot of work on his trees. And so then I joined Yamato, and I would say about 16, 17, and
Nice.
And went from there.
I remember when I first joined BSSF that there would be kids that would come in with their parents or something like that, and I felt there were a few that kind of stuck, like people that stuck around for a few years. But I
Right.
think from a teacher's perspective, it's probably really kind of fun and exciting to see like a teenager actually into it. And I'm guessing that that's probably what Johnny was tuning into when he saw you. He knew that you had like a family history of it, and so he probably knew that you were in it for the long haul. And to someone who grows and sells trees, I think that can be really interesting.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. You're right. There's not a lot of young people, and it's something I often wish there was more of. And I think that's one of the things that I really think is special about the expo, is that being that it's done on such a high level, and also with the advertising of it, and I think it's going to hopefully bring in a lot more younger folks, because at the end of the day, right, I mean, we're all just passing time here on Earth, right? So it's like, I want my trees to go to somebody who's going to be able to take care of them and move them forward and progress them, and hopefully make them much better than I was able to. And without the young blood, it's hard to where are we going to do? What are we going to pass these on? So I often try to get my son into it. He
I was just going to say, your son seems like he's Well, I mean, what is he, 7?
He's 6, yeah.
6.
He's got into first grade.
So, but I think people, when you grow up, just like you, when you grow up with something and it's just sort of, maybe you're not interested in it at the time, but it just becomes kind of your subconscious thing, and then you come back to it later.
Yeah, that's always been my hope. I mean, I don't want to push it on him. I want him to do it because he, enjoys it and because he wants to do it for himself. But that's always been my hope, because what better way to keep these trees going is to pass them on to my son, right? I mean, I could always sell them to people that I know are going to do well with the trees, but if I could leave them all to my son and have him move them forward and keep them in the family for another 50 or 60 years, that'd be pretty cool. So, I mean, that's what really, I think, what makes bonsai in Japan so amazing, is that they're passed down through so many different generations, right? And we just don't have that here, and that's because it's still relatively new in the United States.
Well, but I think it's something like you're talking about, not letting your trees deteriorate as you get older. I think it's actually something that the bonsai community is working on improving, is just that process of passing trees, whether it's to your kids or, a friend that you met at the club or just in a sale, that type of thing really improves the top level stuff as we continue going through years and decades worth of progress. But I mean, I've tried to get my kids into doing it, and I didn't hand them a pair of scissors when they were 3 or something like that. Actually, that sounds like a really bad idea, but
yeah, I would say, no, I don't know about 3, but
yeah, right. So, I mean, I would have got stabbed because three-year-olds are psychopaths, but I mean, but I think I did just sort of, but like the backyard's always been full. They're like their entire childhood, the backyard has been full of bonsai, and I'm not going to say they go out there that often, because I think I get a little bit nervous when that happens. But
as you should. Yeah, as you should.
But I kind of hope that my kids will kind of circle back to it. But right now, they're much more into video games than they are.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I remember when Nico was born, I was thinking to myself, boy, I'm going to have to figure something out when he gets a little bit older to prevent him from knocking trees over or messing with things. And it's funny, he literally, and he is a mischievous kid, there's no way around it, but I don't know if he's just out of fear or what, but he will mess with a lot of things and disturb a lot of things around the house, but he will not touch my trees. So it's interesting, I don't know if it's just because he knows how important they are to me, or if he just knows he'll be in big trouble if he does, or maybe he just really enjoys the trees and just doesn't want to mess with them. I don't know. So we'll find out one day. My
most surprising kid story was when this was only a couple of years ago. So my older son is 19, my younger son is 14, and I think 2 years ago in the spring, we had like a late season winter storm, and it was the weirdest storm that's ever come through my yard, because I mean, I've lived in the same house for almost 20 years.
Right.
And so I'm pretty familiar with how the weather patterns and whatnot. And here comes this storm where all of a sudden the wind is coming out of the east instead of the west. I mean, like the wind always comes from the west, or maybe the south or north, right? Or southwest, northwest. That was coming due east, and it was like there was a hurricane. So I'm like out in the yard picking up every tree and just literally shoving it inside the house.
Yeah.
Because I think I lost 2 or 3 trees off the bench with broken pots in the midst of this process. My neighbor's fence fell into my yard.
Oh boy.
So
I think I remember this actually.
So like 10 minutes into this whole thing where I'm like running around sweating and moving my trees, and my 2 kids show up and they're like, which tree should I move? Like they've never touched these trees before, and I'm just like, okay, grab that one and move it in. And it was kind of, for me, it was like oh, they understand how important this is to me. And I think that's where I was headed with this, is like, as mischievous as he might be, probably just understands how important it is to you.
They probably sense your stress level too was rising, and so they were like, oh, let's help that out before.
Oh, it was a mess.
Yeah, I mean, luckily for us, in the Bay Area, you talk, what's the term? The tree shuffle, or
the spring tree shuffle, fall tree shuffle,
where it's like a lot of these folks in different parts of the United States have to, it's like they'll have a 70-degree day, and then the maple leaves will start to open and things will start to progress, and then next thing you know, they have a 28-degree day, and they're like, oh my God, I have to get these trees out of the cold before the leaves burn. And luckily for me, I don't really have that.
It's so mild.
I've had a few. I've lived here now for 6 years, and I've had a couple winters where it dropped below 30, but it's such a short period of time. It's like 3 or 4 hours, and the pots freeze, but it's not but then it warms up to 45, 50 degrees during the day and things thaw out and it's fine. I've never had any problems. There has been a couple real windy storms where I was concerned, and I just take the trees off the benches and put them on the ground, and
Yeah.
I don't really stress too much about it. But most of my trees are maybe similar in style in the sense that I like the short, squatty, kind of powerful trees. So wind blowing them over is a little bit tough.
Right.
You know, if the wind blows these over, I mean, the house is probably going down too. So not really a whole lot I can do at that point, right?
Yeah, I was actually worried about the house too, but the house was standing up as I was dealing with the windstorm. So
Right.
not the same can't be said. My neighbor's fence actually landed on top of a sort of big collected juniper that I had dug out of Sierra. And the funny thing was the tree, it was in a mica pot, so the pot didn't break, but it actually did a full-on like 360 tumble onto the ground underneath the fence. And in the end, it was fine. But at the time, I was like, oh, that thing could be dead. I have no idea. Like it could have just severed the lifeline or whatever.
Serendipity rules, right?
Right.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's all-
sometimes weather really gets the best of you sometimes, even when you're expecting / prepared for it.
I think I came out and visited you not too long after that storm because I remember some of the carnage that was when it happened, and I think we had a similar storm here. I just obviously you have a lot more trees than me, so I didn't have as much of a concern. But yeah, it helps to have. I mean, the way my house is set up here and is it's kind of boxed in, right?
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of room for wind to pick up too much here. Where yours more kind of like on a hill there on a corner, so it's a little bit easier, I would think, for the wind to get to you. So
it is, yeah. I'm up on a hill and it's exposed. It's pretty sheltered on three sides, but that looking east towards Mount Diablo, I can see Mount Diablo and it's just wide open. But
right.
that was the only time I've ever had strong wind coming directly from that direction. I mean, because we get fall winds that are kind of hot, but they're not like 40, 50 miles an hour kind of thing.
It's pretty cool. I can actually, we can't see it while we're sitting down, but we can actually see Mount Diablo from my house here too.
Yeah.
And I remember when we had, over off to the left here, and I remember when we had that really cold winter and there was a ton of snow up there. My wife and son, we went up there and played in the snow a little bit, but it was neat because as I laid in bed in my bedroom, I could look out and I could see the snow on Mount Diablo, which is really not something obviously you see in California, the Bay Area, right? So
yeah, it's like kind of once or twice per decade. It seems like you actually get snow on the.
It's definitely rare, but it was very cool. So
we talked about the tree that you got from your grandfather. Did you get any trees from your dad or later from Johnny?
Yeah. So my dad was not into bonsai, just my grandfather, and then I do have one tree that I got from Johnny that is really it's definitely my best collected tree, and I guess I'm a little impartial to it because it's mine, but I would say out of all the Sierra junipers that I've seen in the United States, it's easily top 5 with the deadwood and the shari on the trunk, and it's got a great legacy because it was collected by Jimmy and Adomi. The story I got from him when I was younger was that he collected it in the mid-'70s in the Cisco Grove area, going up towards Truckee. And so it's been a bonsai now, or been in a bonsai pot for 50 years, which is also pretty rare in the United States, right? To have a tree that's collected that actually lasted that many years in a pot. Yeah. And so he had it for several years, and then I believe in the late 90s he sold it to Johnny Uchida, and Johnny had it until I bought it from him in 2017. And I will never say the price because it was ridiculously cheap, but he knew how important it was to me, and I actually have pictures of myself with the tree when I was 14 when I first started
I think I've seen those. Yeah.
So, and it's changing a lot. So about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, I started some talks with Peter T. and with the intention of grafting it. And we went back and forth. We were going to do a Toigawa, we were going to do Kishu, we were going to do Tosho, what we were going to do, and we ultimately decided on a Toigawa. And the main reason was one, I don't have a collected tree with a Toyogawa on it, so I like the variety. That was one of the big reasons, and also there's the value to increase the value, and also we were going to lower the height a lot. Currently, it's about 44 inches, and the goal is to get it down to about 34. So because all the interest is in the lower part of the trunk.
That would probably take some grafting.
Definitely. So yeah.
Or splitting.
Yeah. So we did, so it's been now at Peter's house for, just about 3 years. And we did some approach grafts on it, and 2 of them took. The third one didn't. And then we did another third one, or he did another third one last year. And it looks, fingers crossed, like it's going to go. So hopefully we'll get to start styling it. And I told him my goal is Pacific Bonsai Expo 2032. So, we'll see if we can make it happen. But
we'll see if we can get that far with the expo too.
Oh, I think you guys will be fine. But, the one thing it's funny that when I talk about that, though, is that, you see a lot of collected trees and they're grafted, and even the ones that are more ramified and really nice, if you look up under the structure, you can still kind of tell because the grafted branches look really young. And that's the one thing that I wish, and I'll give Marco Invernizzi credit. He told me this 25 years ago when I first met him. He was like, Mike, any collected tree you have, graft it right now. And I didn't listen. And I wish I would have listened because, and there's definitely some allure to the, to the native foliage. I mean, the smell and you definitely take some wildness out of it when you get rid of the native foliage, but just the sustainability over time. I mean, it's just to get the structure, to get the mochi komi that we want in all of our junipers, right? It's really, really difficult with a Sierra or California, and so much easier with a Kishu or a Toyogawa variety.
Yeah, that looseness, the lack of density that you see in the native junipers is sort of hard to overcome. And I mean, I also have a juniper up at Peter's that's being grafted with Kishu in my case, but it's a Rocky Mountain, and it needed a root graft. So at that point I was just like, okay, I'm going to hand this over to Peter because I've got enough trees to take care of. And he's doing this all the time now with a lot of trees, Californias and Rockies and Sierras and whatnot. So I think he's doing a really good job of it. And I think he's been, now this is like third-hand information. I'll have to interview Peter about this, or you could fill us in. It's like, he's kind of advocating grafting the Chinese juniper cultivars onto collected trees just because of what you said, that it, like, the longevity and the when you rewire the branching on old junipers, you're essentially making it young again.
Right.
Whereas if you can use the traditional Japanese techniques to kind of allow that branching to age more, there's like a kind of another layer of complexity that you can get into the tree that it's really hard with native stuff.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I also think it has a lot to do with the aesthetic that you're looking for. I mean, big trees, if you have a 4.5 foot tree that has a native foliage, I think it's far more acceptable, right? But a lot of the trees the sizes that I want, right? I want that 15 to 30 inch range, and it's hard because the foliage is so coarse. But I never knock anyone that wants to keep native foliage. I mean, if it's a personal thing and you like it and you're okay with wiring every year and the tree always having wire on it, and it's good for the guys that make copper wire, right? I mean, keeps their business moving, but
keep it flowing.
Yeah, exactly. But I love to wire. I think it's great. I pride myself on it, but at the same time I don't want to do it every year on the same tree. If I can avoid it. And like you said, it does. It takes some of the age out of it when you're constantly wiring it and constantly redoing things, and it's I don't know, it's just not for me. And to be quite honest, I prefer the more Japanese aesthetic. It's always been the direction I like to go, and that's one of the reasons why I go with Peter on a lot of work, is because I like the way his approach to bonsai. I like he's definitely more of the Japanese aesthetic, and that's what appeals to me. So that's why.
Do you think that your preference for the Japanese aesthetic comes from your long history of dealing, or of being a part of the Fuji Club and then working with Johnny, or do you think it was something that you developed later?
I think it has. I think that's a big part of it. I think it also has to do with when I was learning bonsai early on, all I had was these monthly meetings and magazines. You know, the
Right, yeah.
the people that have gotten into bonsai over the last 10 years, I don't think they realize how fortunate they are to have not only, you know, when I first got into bonsai, there was the old time Japanese folks, and there was Kathy Shaner. You know,
Right.
I mean, there was Warren Hill too, but he was, you know, a different location, and there wasn't a lot of like Japanese trained professionals out there. Now there's dozens. You know, it's like, who do you choose from, right? And I think that's great. You know, it's good for them. It's good for business. It's good for the community because there's so many more professionals that are working on trees. But yeah, a lot of the things I learned were from the Japanese. A lot of the books I was reading were Bonsai Focus at the time, or Bonsai Today at the time,
Right,
before
yeah.
Bonsai Focus. And a lot of the work that I was reading about was being done by Japanese professionals, by Kimura and, you know,
Yeah,
by Kobayashi. And
Bonsai Today was largely translated Kinbon magazine
Exactly.
articles, so
Yep.
it's, yeah, I mean, probably 70% Japanese influence,
Yeah.
as opposed to some of the domestic artists that were coming up at the time. I think more in the East Coast, because I think the publisher's in New Hampshire or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
But yeah, it's an interesting mix of things. But because I mean, I've looked through the whole set. I think there's
Right.
100 and something of them, and most of it's from Kinbon, so very Japanese influence. But it's interesting to think about the difference in experience that you've had. You know, having that background with actually going to clubs where there were older Japanese folks who maybe were first or second generation from quite a while ago, and living in the Bay Area, versus someone who maybe was in Colorado or on the East Coast, where there's less of a tradition or less immigration from Japan in those locations.
Right.
Didn't have as much exposure to the actual firsthand Japanese influence.
Yeah, and the reality is a lot of the Japanese that I learned from early on, they weren't bonsai professionals by trade. They were landscape architects, or they owned nurseries, and the majority of their money was made either by, you know, doing landscapes or aesthetic pruning, things like that, like what Dennis did for many years. And I don't know, is Dennis still an aesthetic pruner, or is he
Makishima?
retired? Yeah, is he retired now?
I think he's still doing it.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's, and a lot of those concepts can be applied to bonsai, but not necessarily. So I know that, like the wiring, I know a lot of the Japanese that early on, they were very minimal wiring, and when they did wiring, you know, some of it was decent, some of them, you know, had a lot to be desired, and I think that's just because there was no real formal instruction for it. And
Well, when you were in the Fuji Club, you said it was around 1980? 80?
no, so it would have been, let's see, early 90s.
Early 90s.
Yeah, when I started, so 93, 94, that time frame.
Yeah, so I'm going to say that was even before Kathy came back, and there just wasn't a lot of information at the time about the technical aspects of wiring that Kimura was sort of popularizing in Japan. I don't know the full history of it, but I know that, you know, if you look at the old Kokofu books, prior to like 1990, I mean, it was sort of, there's not a cutoff, so to speak, but you see like a big evolution in the way that trees looked in Japan, at least as represented by the show books,
Right.
in those years as well. So I think it was probably the same thing. Like we were slowly getting that influence in the change in wiring and change in philosophy too. I remember when I was a beginner, people saying, "Oh, you can't show a tree with wire on it."
Right. Yep. I remember that too.
And I think now it's like kind of, well, I mean, Boone always taught me that you shouldn't show a deciduous tree with wire on it because, you know, you're just going to be looking at the wire.
Right.
But with conifers, that usually they're wired in one form or another.
Yeah.
And it actually, so that kind of brings us to you have another tree in this year's expo that you're going to be exhibiting, and maybe even winning the extra
I don't know
large.
about that, but that would be wonderful. But for me, it's just an honor to be, again, this is the second expo, and to have a tree accepted again is really cool for me. And it's actually, the tree that I'm exhibiting is a coast live oak, and I was going to exhibit it during the first one. And as everyone in bonsai knows, sometimes unforeseen things happen, and it got burnt. The leaves got burnt a little bit, and it probably still could have been shown, but I think it's a really cool tree, and I wanted to make sure that when I showed it, it was at its best. and or at least as good as I could get it over the next couple years.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's a really fun tree. It's came from Gareth Shepard, and I remember. It's funny because as I was over the years in bonsai, I was like, oaks. I don't know about oaks. Wasn't really too hot on them. And then I don't know what flipped in my mind, but like all of a sudden I was like, I love oaks. And I think I honestly, I'll give credit to JT, to John Thompson. I think I was at a show and I saw one of his and I was like, man, that thing's pretty badass. Like I need one of those. And
yeah.
and I started doing my asking around, and because I've always found, like, if you really want to buy a tree, it's, try to get to someone's private collection,
Mm-hmm.
and go and talk to them and see them, especially if you know them. And I think you get a better chance at a good tree than just at a club show or sale or something like that. And or at an auction where you're sitting there bidding back and forth against someone. And, I'd rather just negotiate with the person themselves. Right. And
Right. Yeah.
so, so I got some tips that Gareth was the guy for oaks, and called him one day and said, hey, can I come by your house and see if you have anything? He's like, yeah, I've got some stuff for sale you might like. And walked in, I saw the tree that's in the expo. This is 2017 that I bought it. And I was like, yeah, that's the one.
Nice.
That's a pretty cool tree. I liked it because it looked a lot like an oak in nature. And that's, you talk about, one of the things I learned with watching Bonsai Mirai live over the years is that,
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple different ways you can style bonsai, right? You can style it like a bonsai, that traditional triangle shape, and that's fine, nothing wrong with that. Or you could maybe try to style it more like it would look in nature. And I tried to do that with this tree. That's been my goal. I mean, obviously, I think I was telling you earlier before we started the interview that I wanted the tree that had good structure, but also had a little wildness to it too.
Right. Yeah.
And that's sort of what I've been trying to achieve with this is, I don't want it to have this perfect laid out structure, because that's just not oak. But at the same time, I think sometimes folks let a tree just do its thing and say, oh, it's how it grows, because they want to be lazy or they want to avoid trying to make a good structure. And so I try to do a little bit of both here on this one. And, it's getting there. It probably would be even better in 2 years, but I think it's ready to go in.
So did you know Gareth prior to going to his yard?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I met him the first time I went down to Santa Cruz to do a demo for their club, and I want to say that would have been maybe early 2010, 2011, somewhere in that time frame.
Nice.
And I met him, and I had always kind of known of him. I mean, he's been in bonsai for a long time, and you see him at different events. And
well, I met him the same way. I mean, I went down and did a couple of demonstrations or talks for the Santa Cruz Club, and he was there, and he had I think I've done 3 or 4 at this point, and every time I show up, he's got like a really interesting tree in front of him, because they do kind of like a hybrid, talk/workshop a lot of the time, or at least when I've been down there.
Yeah.
And every time I look at his tree, it's like, wow, that's not a young tree. That's something that's been around for a while. And he's obviously been doing bonsai for a long time. I didn't know that he collected and sold oaks, but maybe I'll have to give him a visit.
Yeah, and I don't know if the window is closed or not, but I know this one that's going to be in the expo. I might have my dates wrong, and he can correct me if he listens to this, but I want to say late 90s, early 2000s, he collected this tree, and I believe he told me from the Aptos area. So it's Yamadori, which is cool, and I would have to say it's at least 80 to 100 years old. I mean, the way the bark is on this tree, I can't imagine it's much younger than that.
Yeah, I mean, for Coast Live oaks, that's pretty unusual and really good bark on it. It's interesting through the range of Coast Live oaks, and I've noticed this in Santa Cruz and Monterey areas. There are very different bark types, even though it's ostensibly the same species. Right,
even bark types and leaf types too.
Yeah.
Because I noticed, like on mine, it's funny because as it blows out in the spring, it'll, like right now it kind of has more of an oval shaped leaf, almost like a holly oak type of a leaf. But when it blows out, sometimes you'll see the normal, more, or not say normal, but the more Coast Live Oak-esque leaves where they're more of a rounder shape or a more oval shape. And it's a neat tree. I mean, it's one that I got for a great price, and I've done a lot of work on it, and it's coming along great. So I'm excited. Yeah. I'm excited to see what the public thinks of it.
Oh, everybody's going to love it. The the other thing I wanted to ask you about is that so I don't know if you probably haven't heard it, but I did an interview with both Jay and Greg at the same time.
Okay.
And when you're talking about Gareth, I thought back to Greg because Jay and Greg McDonald, and I thought back to Greg because he likes holding on to trees. He really likes to get something and just have it for many, many years. And, he hardly ever sells trees, whereas his brother is selling trees all the time. Right. And so I think it kind of like reminded me that the multiple times that I visited you here in your garden, every time that I come, it's a little bit different. It's not always the same. And you keep a really clean, kind of meticulously cared for garden. Talk a little bit about like kind of curating a collection, how your eye has changed over the years, and you're really good at kind of buying and selling trees to improve your personal collection. Not so much as like a broker, so to speak, but just because you're trying to, I want a Tosho, or I want a you were saying you wanted a Hinoki cypress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of a complex question because there's several reasons why I do this or I have over the years, and there's some trees I've sold that I regret, and there's my buddy Howard used to give me a hard time, but he'd say, man, you get a tree looking pretty good and then you sell it. He goes, why don't you keep it and let it really mature? And there's a lot to be said for that, and that's something I'm trying to do now, but I think a lot of the reason why I've bought and sold trees is just because I'm either wanting to improve and get a better tree, and so I'll sell a few trees to buy a better one, or now at this point in my life, it's really 100% based on time. I started a new position at work about a year ago where I was promoted to lieutenant, which is, a lot more I need to be available a lot more, and having a 6-year-old that runs around like crazy, and then I have another really expensive watch hobby, which takes money as well, and then I like to work out and I like to spend time with family and friends, and so I think having a smaller collection, it's not to knock folks that have 200 or 300 trees, but for me, if you have a lot going on in life, I think it's better to have fewer trees that you can really focus your attention on. And it also becomes, for me, when I had like 100 trees, it was almost becoming like a chore. It's like, oh my God, I have 20 black pine or 25 black pine that I have to decandle all in June, and I would like stress out about it, like, oh my God, because I wanted my trees to stay looking good, and I didn't want to miss the window and have it, lose ramification or thicken and not be good as it was before, right? Time is a big thing. And I think it's, you just have to make that decision. What do you want to do? Do you want to have fewer trees that are higher quality, or do you want to be more of a grower and have a lot more trees? Of course, like guys like you and Jonas who are doing it for a living now. I mean, that's obviously, you can't just have a few trees, right? But
yeah, you can't sell trees you don't have. So
exactly.
if your living is coming from selling trees. Yeah, I mean, the having just the right number of trees, I think, is actually something that a lot of people struggle with. And then the idea of just like, I have room, I could just put it over here. When I walked into your yard today, you have a whole empty bench, right? Because you're just, I don't need the space right now. I don't need to have a tree sitting over there. Mm-hmm. I have enough good trees. And so how do you decide what you're going to sell? I mean, is there a thought process, or is it just sort of?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about earlier how I want to remodel my yard and make it more of a, and I don't want to sound like presumptuous, but more of like a museum type of setting, to where I can have friends or family over and we can sit back here and have a drink or smoke a cigar and like look at, in other words, I don't want my backyard to look like a growing bonsai nursery.
Right.
I want it to look facility. Like more of I want it to look more of like a refined, showcase kind of a thing.
Display garden.
Kind of like Jay, right? Like Jay McDonald. He
Yeah.
he likes to have his trees in tip-top shape. He likes to have that allure of nice trees when people come to visit. And so that's sort of where I'm at. And if I look at a tree and I don't, if it has too many flaws, or because, right, flaws you can either fix or you can hide. Right. And if I feel like I can't fix it or I can't adequately hide it, it's a tree I'm probably going to sell. And also rarity, right, in species. I want to have, even though I don't have a lot of trees, I have quite a few different varieties in my yard. Mostly conifers, but I have, pines, I have broadleaf, I have deciduous, I have a couple different, I have a rock planting. I try to change it up a little bit, but I also try to use trees that work in my climate too, like redwoods. I can't keep right. Redwood just don't,
Oh, really?
They just do not do well here. And I had a really nice Stewardia that just declined, and now you have it, and I'm hoping you can do something good with it. But just for selfish reasons, I really wanted one, and then I realized, this is just not going to be the right environment for this tree because it was too hot.
Too hot and dry, probably. Yeah,
exactly.
They have very sensitive leaves.
They do. Yep.
Yeah, it's doing well, by the way.
Good.
I stuck it in a big Japanese terracotta trainer, and it's got like foot-long shoots on it. And
Perfect.
I just went in with one of my students and rewired it to start resetting the structure that was lost to the heat.
I'm sure 10 years from now I'm going to be really upset that I sold it to you, but
well, I mean, when trees go through something like that, I think it might even take more than 10 years. I mean, Jonas has a Stewardia in the expo this year that I think it was imported from Japan in the 90s, and
just a double trunk, right?
Yeah, it's a big tree, and it went through maybe not similar, but it went through like some sort of trauma a number of years ago where part of the root base died off, and so it has kind of a wound that's healing near the base. And I think the same thing happened with yours. Like part of the reason that maybe it was dying back, or cause and effect.
Right.
Basically, there's a portion of the trunk that died.
Right.
Right. So that's the part that I think will take a really long time to come back around. But
it's funny
it's
because
a tree.
I remember talking to Jonas about his Stewardia several years ago, and the conversation was around that scar, that dead area, and whether he was going to air layer, whether he was going to graft roots, and I don't know what he ended up doing.
I think he's just kind of left it because I think in the strict Japanese aesthetic, like, it would just be unacceptable. But I actually think it looks cool. I mean, I like dead wood on deciduous trees, just like having dead wood on juniper or something. Like, as long as the tree's not going to die, I'm perfectly fine with having some dead wood on it.
And it's such a great tree with ramification and everything. It's like, and it's a good size. And again, how many of them do you see, right? It's like the rarity of trees. I think that plays a big role in, what do you do with it and how do you treat it? Because if it's a super rare tree and you have some technique that you use on it and then the tree dies, and it's like, well, there goes the one Stewardia that was 36 inches in the Bay Area that no one has.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, there were no other Stewardia. If you think about the expo as a representation, there were plenty of Sierra junipers this year that were entered, but only one Stewardia.
Yeah. And that's another reason about when it comes to junipers, when it comes to grafting, is not just for the overall sustainability and care over the years, but just having different stuff,
Right.
And I disagree with it in terms of how the Japanese have done it too. Like, I don't think that every single tree should have Itoigawa on it. But for me, I think we talked about earlier too, with my Sierra that I grafted Tosho on. I mean, and the people that would email me on Instagram and Facebook, like, why'd you do that? Tosho sucks, why not Itoigawa? And I'm like, well, because for one, I like it. And two, I didn't have a Tosho and I wanted something different.
Yeah.
And I think if you want that variety, like if you want to have a backyard that's got 100 Sierra junipers in it, that's cool. That's your thing. And you love it. That's great. For me, I don't want to have a yard where every single tree is the same color and every single tree has the same foliage. It's not for me.
I think we could actually make the case for Tosho right now because
Let's sell Tosho to everybody.
Right, yeah, exactly. So here's the hard sell. Like I mean, I'm sitting here looking at your Blue Atlas cedar, and earlier I was looking at the Tosho, and for people who are not familiar, Tosho is the Japanese needle juniper, Juniperus rigida.
Rigida, yeah.
And very similar to common juniper in the western United States up in the mountains, but it has a beautiful blue-green stripe on the upper surface of the needle, and the needles are splayed, so it's not like a scale juniper like Itoigawa or the other junipers that we're talking about. It actually has needles splayed out. Now, I think that's probably the same reason that people hate it, is that one, it looks coarser, and two, those things have got to get really prickly at some point. I mean, when they're fresh, they're not that. They're prickly, but they're not like painful prickly. I mean, if you've worked on Femina or Tosho, and you're getting into like the old dried up brown needles, I think that's when you're starting to like it's like getting a finger prick for a blood test or something.
Right, yeah. And I think like mine is not. It's not to that super refined state. Yeah. So it's a little bit easier to get in there with my hands now. But yeah, I would venture to say that 5 or 6 years from now,
get some Kevlar gloves.
Yeah, it's going to be, it's going to be. But you know what? But 6 years from now, I'll be retired, so I can just sit down and take all day to do it if I need to, and slow it down and not have to rush through it. But they're great trees. I mean, they backbud super easily, and you know, like I said, it's a cool aesthetic. It's not something you see, and I like the rarity of it. So
yeah, no, I agree. I've been, you know, in the 20 years or so that I've been doing bonsai, people are always talking about Tosho, and then they're just like, oh yeah, they're not very common in the US. I'm like, well, why hasn't someone done anything about that?
Right.
Like, why hasn't? So I'm working on propagating them, but it'll take a while before I actually have sellable stock, because when you're propagating from just like one plant, you have to then clone that and then let those grow out. It's like years worth of effort. But you've been propagating a golden shimpaku. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
And talk a little bit about that.
So the golden shimpaku that I have actually originated from a Jimmy and Adomi tree that John Kirby bought from him when right before he passed away, when he had his big sale at his house. And I kicked myself. I wish I would have been able to get that tree. Not a super like amazing tree, but it was a tree that Jimmy had grown for many, many years. And I was at an intensive class at Boone's several years ago, and Kirby they were pruning that tree. And I was like, these are just going to go in the garbage, so I'm going to take these cuttings. And I took like 7 or 8 home, and I think 4 took. And I actually gave 2 away as a gift to some friends, and then I have one that I'm sort of just growing as a shohin, and then the other one I planted in the ground, and I plan to use it for future propagation, more cuttings, maybe some air layers, and then for grafting. I have another Sierra that I want to graft it on, and I just think I'm sure I'm probably going to get the side eye from some folks at some point down the line when I put it in the show and they see this gnarly juniper with yellow foliage, and they're like, that tree's dead, or
well, I mean, I was gonna say it was like the ongoing joke whenever Kirby brought that into the workshop, that everybody would just start ribbing him like, aren't you fertilizing that thing? I mean, like, because Kishu, because it has more the texture of a Kishu than Itoigawa as I've looked at it, and Kishu doesn't yellow very easily, but Itoigawa does, and that's always sort of a lack of the proper amount of fertilizer, proper type of fertilizer. So it's understandable that beginners would think of yellow foliage on a juniper as a bad thing. And so make the case, just like we did for Tosho. What do you think? Why do you think that the world needs more yellow junipers?
So, you know, again, it goes towards it just like the variety, right? Like when I go to a show and I see Sierra juniper, and there's honestly no knock on the Sierra foliage. It's a beautiful like teal color, and it's great, and it has a nice contrast. But at the same time, if every show you go to, if every tree has Kishu grafted on it, then every tree is going to be essentially the same color.
Yep.
If every tree has a Toegawa, they're all going to have that lime green color. If every tree, you know what I mean? So on and so forth. Yeah. And I think it would be really neat to get a juniper in a show that actually has some color, right? Can you imagine like walking into a show, seeing an impressive trunk with this like golden yellow like canopy, right? Like that's something that, for one, you don't see, and I'm sure it'll turn some people on, and others will probably be like, nah, it's not for me, and that's okay.
I think if it's a well done tree, that people would really appreciate it, because I'm not familiar with the particulars of it. Is it kind of variable in color, like the more sun? Yeah.
So the more sun it gets, the more direct sunlight it gets, the yellower it will get, and so it's kind of like like the human body, right? Like when you lay out and you tan, you get dark, and then the skin underneath is a little bit lighter. Right. So what ends up happening is you get like this really golden yellow color where the sun hits, and then underneath it has this really like pretty lime green color to it.
Closer to Kishu.
Closer, I would say actually more closer to a Toegawa.
Okay.
The foliage, I would say, is a sort of in between Itoigawa and Kishu. It's or actually, you know what, not even Itoigawa. I'd say it's more in between Kishu and like a Prostrata. It's a little bit coarser, but still can be very compacted.
Right.
But
yeah, it looks like it gets pretty dense pretty easily.
Yeah, it does. It does. But it's a little bit like if you were to take the one I have over here and you were put it next to the Kishu here, you would see that the Kishu is a little bit denser.
Right.
But definitely will get far more dense than like a Sierra or a California. And I just, and people might argue, well, California juniper foliage is yellow. Why not just use that? And again, for me, I hate to knock Californias because they're cool.
Well, it's the coarseness.
It's the coarseness. It's the foliage. If it it breaks pretty easily when you're trying to wire it.
Yeah.
And again, if it's not wired, it can be droopy really easily. And it's once if a California is wired out and pruned properly, of course, it looks really nice. But as soon as that wire comes off, it just kind of back to being floppy and,
yep.
And it's not for me. So, and again, no one's doing it. So I'm trying to maybe start something,
So in the 2022 Expo, you had your Sierra Juniper, and since then you have kind of revamped it a little bit, worked on the deadwood, changed the angle, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But are you considering grafting that?
Yes. Yeah, so that's the one I'm considering the golden Shimpaku on.
Oh, nice.
So I've talked to Peter about it a couple times, and I think initially there was some skepticism about it, like, do you want to do that? It's not something that's very widely done. And then I figure I love the foliage, I love the trunk of the Sierra that I have. So if I put the two together, why would I not like it? So which would basically which would mean I have no Sierra foliage in my collection at all now, because I have 3 Sierras, well 4. One is at Peter's, but that's being grafted with a Toegawa. This one has Kishu. The other one has Tosho on it, and now that one has golden Shimpaku. So, which I'm okay with. I love Sierra juniper deadwood, the crush and the way that deadwood is formed. I really enjoy it, but I think that for my own personal feeling, I like to have the more compact foliage.
Yeah. But you haven't, let's see, I think there are 2 or 3 other varieties that I've seen, but not easy to get either. And that is Fudo, Blaui, and Kyozura. Mm-hmm. Are you familiar with all 3 of those?
Yeah, I am, for sure.
And you're not as into those as you are into the...
I actually really like the Kyozura. Okay. That one's, we talked about that. It's such a great, it's like the colors like right in between Itoigawa and Kishu. Yeah. The density of it's right in between the two. I honestly, I don't have a lot of experience with it. I've seen it, and probably should have purchased one, at least one that I could propagate. And
they're not very common. I think the one that I have came from Gary Ishii, who I think is the person who named it after one of his clients. And
it's my understanding, yeah.
Yeah. He's in Southern California, still Chikuguen Nursery. Mm-hmm. So if anybody wants it, they have to get it from him.
Yeah. Gary's the man. And his dad, when I first went to Chikuguen, his dad was still running the show. And I remember being kind of in awe with all the grafted. There's just so many trees packed into that nursery. But there were a lot of great trees. And then I remember wanting to go into the growing area and where no one's allowed, and I got the hard no. And I was like, okay, got it.
How old were you at the time?
I think the first time I visited Chikugoan, I was early 20s.
Okay.
Early mid-20s, so about 20 years ago, probably.
So you didn't have that, like, early teen charm kind of.
No,
earlier.
I guess not.
You could have gotten past him.
No. Well, I definitely didn't charm Gary or Moss enough. So, but I enjoyed it, and Gary and I became friends over the years, and of course Moss passed away. But I went down to do some demos in Southern California, and I always make a point to go stop and say hi when I'm there. And
yeah, I've only been there once. I do remember they had Tosho, though. I was kind of.
Yeah,
it was. I think it was the first time I saw it in person.
Yeah,
that was probably 15 years ago or so.
Yeah. It's a very cool place, and I think they've been around since the early 80s. I want to say 81 or something like that is when they started. So they've been pretty big staple down there in Southern California.
It's crazy to think. I mean, I was born in 74, so I was just a kid in 80, but
right,
that's 45 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a long time to run a nursery.
Yes, it is. Yeah, and especially back then when bonsai wasn't nearly as popular, right? I mean, from like, you figure their first 20 years of operation, right, was probably really difficult to make it, so they obviously were doing something right. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see more bonsai nurseries. That's the one thing that unfortunately we just don't have a lot of.
Not enough of them.
Not enough,
Yeah.
So maybe with the growing interest, that's something that'll pick up over the years.
Well, there's one more thing I wanted to ask you to give us a little bit more detail on.
Sure.
I mentioned that you're doing a demonstration / talk at the expo. That's going to be on Saturday morning, and I think you and Sam are going to be doing a double-headed demo. And it's going to be you're going to start, and then we're going to have actually a talk going on while you guys are working in the background, and then come back to you guys as the fronting it again in the middle of the day, so you have plenty of time to work. Tell us a little bit about what you're going to be working on.
Yeah, so I think actually it's really cool the way that you guys are going to do that, and it's been sort of a demo theory that I've wished we would do more so here. You see it a lot with now it's called the Trophy, I think.
Yeah,
it used to be
European
called
shows. Yeah.
And they have demonstrators on stage for even longer, 8 hours, and it's all
like a whole day.
And people can come and go as they please, and they come back at the end to see the final touches, or they stick around the whole time, whatever you want to do. And I think that's such a way better way to go about it, because you're not rushed through and to be done in an hour for a demo, which is just not enough time to do anything spectacular or good, right?
Right, yeah.
So, and it's going to be great. Sam and I are friends, and he's a super talented guy, and going to be great to be on stage with him. And I think it allows you to get more work done, because while one's talking, the other one can be working, and vice versa. And we're going to be working on very different trees. So I have a California juniper that actually belongs to a friend of mine that I'm going to do some big angle changes on, and it's a chewing size tree, so it's nothing super large, but I think it's something I can get done in 3-4 hour time period.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I don't really love Californias, nor do I really love working on them, but that's a tree I'm going to do a demo on, right? So, but it just sort of happened that way, where when I was invited to do the demo, I thought, let's kind of bring something that has some age, something that's kind of cool, and that I could do some drastic changes to. And it kind of worked out perfectly when my buddy brought this over to have me work on it. I'm like, I think I'll just hold off on working on this and wait till the expo.
Well, I have to say, apart from like a couple of cuttings that you have, it's the shaggiest looking tree in the yard by far. So, so it's got some improvement. I think you can do some good work on it.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot this spring spring into summer to pump it up with strength. It's got some good runners on it now, so it's definitely healthy and ready to be worked on, which is again a pretty key component for me. I don't want to work on a tree that's not healthy. especially if we're going to make big changes.
I just realized this is going to be like a repeat matchup, you and Sam going head to head. After it was last fall at the GSBF Rendezvous, you guys were in the Joshua Roth competition.
That was a ton of fun. I had a great time. Sam's a super talented guy, and you know, it's great to be on stage with him again, and I think we're going to see big things from him.
He's doing a lot of good work.
He's doing a lot of good work, and the one thing that's great about his situation is I see him doing a lot more work with client trees and customer trees. So he's getting the reps in, which I think is only improves, you know, your abilities. So look for big things. I swear Sam didn't pay me to say these nice things. I think highly of Sam, and he's I would love to see more younger people like him, you know, especially with that level of talent, come through.
Yeah, so it should be fun Saturday morning.
It's going to be great, yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Honored to be doing it. Hopefully there's a big turnout.
I hope so, too. Yeah, I mean, the building's a lot bigger, so it may be, you know, even if we get more people, it won't feel quite as crowded this time, I think.
Right. Well, it's going to be it's always fun to get bonsai people together from all over the country, and you know, and I think this is kind of becoming our nationals for the Bay Area, right? So East Coast
that's the plan,
yeah, and you know, I'll give a lot of credit to you and Jonas. I mean, it was an idea I know that was long in the making. I remember us talking about it years before the first one, and it's really cool to see it coming to fruition, and now again having another one 2 years later. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, we're looking forward to it. All right, Mike.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks so much for taking the time to talk
Absolutely.
to me. Anything else you want to add?
No, thank you for having me, and look forward to seeing everybody at the expo.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Yeah, you bet.
The music on today's podcast is brought to you by the fine folks at Blue Dot Sessions. Check them out at www.sessions.blue.